film or series lit your fuse and made you have to tell stories on screen?
Okay, well, I grew up with the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams, with Airplane and Naked Gun and Kentucky Fried Movie, and also with the Blazing Saddles and Animal House and all those movies. Those are the movies that inspired me, made me want to get into the movies. But the movie that probably called to me the most, where I looked at it and I thought, I could do that, and I loved what it was Something Wild by Jonathan Demme. I remember seeing it with my friend 1986 when it came out. It hadn't opened well, but my friend said, you got to see this movie. And I remember walking out of there thinking it was the coolest movie I'd ever seen. It was Jonathan Demme directed. It was Jeff Daniels, Melanie Griffin, and Ray Liotta in his first big role. And it was everything I love in a movie. It was the look, the colors. Somehow he made New York City look like a small town of colorful, friendly places. The soundtrack, Gary Getz did the soundtrack. He was the supervisor. But the music was off the charts, and it wasn't like, there'd always been, traditional score, or you would go to like the Rolling Stones or stuff like that. This was something in between. This was a cooler thing. This was sort of an indie type soundtrack that I hadn't really heard before, and I just remembered the joy of watching that movie. Well, I've ripped it off for the rest of my career. I mean, starting with Dumb and Dumber, I took Jeff Daniels right out of it.
Oh yeah, right.
And I thought, and I remember when the studio said, well, Jeff Daniels isn't a comedy actor. I said, oh yeah, go watch Something Wild. I mean, he killed me. He was hysterical in that. And also the look, I remember when I met with my first production designer and he started designing like Route 66 because they're on the road. I said, no, I want it real. Watch Something Wild. They just filmed real places. Find real places. I want them at an Exxon. I don't want them at a gas station from Texaco from 1950, and right. And the music and just the joy of it all, the look. I tried to get Tak Fujimoto, who was the DP on it. I called him. He was the first guy I called, and he said, well, what's the movie? I said, it's called Dumb and Dumber. He said, that'll be a hard pass. I was like, really? Because I'm a little busy.
Pete's track record with movies is that he loves to just cold call people and pretend he knows what he's doing, and ask him to be on his film. I can see you making that call in 2 seconds.
Yeah. No, I was like, listen, we got this great thing. You want to do it? I love Something Wild. No, and it I went right down to the mock when they're singing with the migrant family in the back of the van. That scene is right out of Something Wild, where they pick up these hitchhikers and they're singing with them. It was a movie that first time I'd seen a movie that to me felt like a rock concert feeling. It just felt like the coolest album, and I loved it. And it's continued to inspire me. And in fact, whenever I work with people, I say, they say, what are you looking for? I said, go watch Something Wild. I'm looking for that. I like that look. I like that feel. And that is the most inspirational movie of my career.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh my gosh, so it's interesting. I guess for me, I have to look at a lot of the movies that I watched when I was younger, and I think one of the performers that really captured me, or captured my attention a lot was Robin Williams. Robin Williams was just, I don't know what it was about him and his movies, but there was this, I just saw like love coming out of his, all of his performances. I always found the good in what he was doing, and I just really loved. I loved like Jumanji. I loved the movie Hook that he did. I thought where he played Peter Pan. That movie, I must have seen that, and this is not an exaggeration, 100 times. I wore that VHS out. I loved movies like The Goonies. A lot of really cool performance-driven movies that were still skewed kind of young, but had really nice directors. And this is not to segue, and this is not blowing smoke up Pete. Never mind, I won't finish that sentence. But yeah, in all seriousness, one of the movies that I had memorized line for line and still reference to this day is Dumb and Dumber. And Jim Carrey's performance in that is unbelievable. He's real. There's nothing really slapstick about what he does, at least and I still think it holds up so well. And Jeff Daniels grounds it so well that I believe their friendship. And it's one of the things that kind of led me to just to be myself and silly and improvisational and big and trust that, because I've seen it be real in that way. So that movie, I think, was one of the reasons that led me to improv and speech and debate and, to sort of just explore and to have fun and keep things funny and lighthearted and knowing that, one of the cool things, and this is why I love working with Pete, is there's nothing really, he's not directing for comedy's sake. I've worked in some comedies where you feel like you have to make a joke here, and never feels like the case with Pete. It's always, I get real turns into funny, and it's really, we've done it very, very tastefully in the writing and the inherent awkwardness of a situation or the honesty of a line is very, very funny, and the reality of the situation is sometimes crazy and very, very funny. And so I love that, and I love that being able to finally kind of apply that more than ever really in this movie that we just finished. And
you were a pleasure to work with on so many levels. People always come up to me and they ask, like, who is like, you must every now and then have like a better experience or a worse experience. And I first of all, I've never had a horrible experience. Like, people like, did you ever have a nightmare? I said, no, I haven't. I don't know why. I just never did. Everybody I've worked with has been super cool, but I've never had anybody more open than you were on this movie. Like, it's a joy to approach you and after a take, and you're like, this way, that way, which way? What do you think? You like it? And when I said, yeah, that's it, great, and you accept that, and if I said, try this over here, a little less of this or a little more of that, and you're like, okay, and it's fun to work like that. It feels like, we're creating something together, because, and I said this before, a lot of times when you approach an actor on the set, you're talking to them, but you can see that in their head, they're doing their own thing. They're thinking, well, what didn't I do? What could I do better? I'm talking to them, and they're kind of looking, but I know they're in their own head mostly, and that's good. That's their process, and that's fine the way it is. But man, when I approach you, you're just like, and it's
man. I appreciate that about working with you as well, man. It's my process is very much like I'm always seeking your approval, and I know you have the roadmap in your mind, and so that was really fun to go up to you, and you always were like, that's it. Towards the end of the movie, there was a lot more you're on the right track, but at the beginning, while still finding it, you always have the best notes and keep me, the character running in the middle, not tipping one direction or too far. I trust you so much with that stuff. It's really,
well, I appreciate that. I remember, like, you have to have that with any actor. Every actor I've worked with, they do that. Like, even the all-time greats like Jim Carrey, Jeff Daniels, they'll look at you like, this, that, they do trust. Right. I remember the first day I did a TV show called Loudermilk, which for 3 years with Ron Livingston and Will Sasso. But I remember the very first day Ron Livingston nailed the scene, and I said, okay, now let's try it this way. Just in case, let's find out, maybe there's something else there. And he said, I don't like it that way. I said, yeah, but just try it that way. And he goes, yeah, but I'm afraid if I do it that way, you're going to use it. And I said, whoa, hold on, Ron. If we're going to work, I mean, there's going to be trust. There's going to be, you got to trust me, I got to trust you. I mean, we can't go forward if it's not that. He goes, I'm sorry. He goes, yeah, of course, I'll do it. and we had the greatest relationship. I think you got to have trust in the person you're working with. You can't keep things from them, thinking their judgment might be so bad they might use it. You know, it's got to be like, let's trust each other.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that does happen from time to time. I mean, I'm happy. I definitely trust you probably more than most people that I have done films with. So it's that's one of the things that I was really like excited about, and it ended up being the case, was that like I knew I trusted your opinion, and I that's why I was so hell bent on like making sure that it's fun to go to a leader, know that you have the roadmap and that you're sensitive to performance notes, because some people you get it on the first take and you're thinking in your mind, what just, were you serious? That's nowhere near, I didn't even say half the lines. They're like, oh really, you didn't? Oh shoot, well we really got to get this day,
we got to get to lunch,
we got to get to lunch. And you're like, lunch? What? Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, I just had one take. That was an important scene. Oh man. And you're like, gosh, that's not gonna be the whole thing. And so it's so fun to work with you, man. I seriously, I can't tell you enough. All right, now I feel like I am blowing smoke.
What sparked each of you to have to do the greatest beer run ever? It's an interesting movie. It starts off with a light heart, and then suddenly it gets really serious. A little like something wild. So what was it that made you have to do that movie, each of you?
Well, the first thing for me is when I saw the documentary, I knew immediately. Someone sent me the 12-minute documentary that Andrew Moscato made, and as soon as I saw it, I called my sister Cindy, who was also my attorney, and said, "Hey, can you look into see who has the rights to this?" Because I knew immediately. That's just an incredible story, and it is, by the way, probably the closest movie in tonally or in the way it moves to Something Wild. Where the first half of Something Wild is just a laugh fest, joyful, fun road trip, and then it turns ugly when Ray Liotta comes in, who is stupendous, by the way. It's still, I mean, he was so good in that movie. He was evil, but you liked him. Somehow he was like, he was walking a line where he was so charming, you couldn't take your eyes off him, and you liked him being around. But in any case, yeah, I knew this had to take a turn because it's the Vietnam War, and there's no happy endings in that war. It's you got to be truthful.
One of the things that stood out to me is I remember where I was at when I read the script, which is I'm like pretty rare, like that you can recall specifics of where you were. I remember the moment I read it. I remember being on page 35 or so when suddenly he's on the boat and going to Vietnam. And I just remember flipping to the front cover over and over again and looking at the line, "This is a true story," or "This is based on a true story." I can't remember which. I think it was "This is a true story." And it just, I was already by the first third of the script, I was in the film. I wasn't rereading pages because I had gotten lost or I was confused by the dialogue. It was written extraordinarily well. I thought it was a fascinating, funny. I just loved what it felt like as I was reading it, and the deeper that I got into it, the more invested I was becoming with these characters, and I knew that it was really something special. And I was reading it simultaneously with a friend of mine, and we kept looking up at each other going like, whoa, this is good. And I read a couple other scripts that week, none of which stuck out to me really in any fashion. And this was like a moment when I was going, whoa, this is really spectacular. And then on top of that, there was also the fact that that Pete was directing it. I immediately thought to myself, Green Book. This is a very sensitive, a topic that needs to be treated with respect and with honor. and but the way that, and which it does, but it's the way into it is this really, not, I won't say naive, but it's like street smart, happy-go-lucky guy that's really just all about love and caring for his friends, and he finds his way through one of the most extreme circumstances that anyone could ever find themselves, and it's a true story. So I don't know, it was just something about it. The stakes seemed high, and I knew that this is the caliber of film I've always aspired to be a part of and wanted to make, and I knew that Pete would deliver that, and it was everything I look for, in a movie. I couldn't believe that, frankly, like it wasn't already cast, or yes, I was over the moon. I was like, guys, I'm like, please, let's do this. What are the odds? And everybody.
I tell you, if I hadn't seen the documentary, I don't know. Like, if I'd read a script, I would have doubted too much. But the documentary showed the 4 guys who he had visited in Vietnam today, all miraculously are still alive, and talking about it and showing photos from when he was there. And I was just like, I can't believe this is real. And that was
another thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was great.
All right. So the next question. So when you were on your way up and finding your voice, what movie did you watch, or maybe it was a movie or a performance, or a great job directing in Pete's case, that was so good it made you shake your head and question if you could ever rise to that level?
That's an interesting question. They weren't the ones, they weren't the movies that are surrounding my thing. Like, I remember when I saw Airplane, again, Zucker Brothers, Jim Abrams, I was so inspired, like, and I just thought, oh my God, this is so fun, and it's so cool that you can make people laugh, and how fun would that be, and to be able to do that. And I knew, like, it was way above where I was. I was just a kid, but it made me want to do it. But I always felt yes, I thought they were above me, but I always wanted to get to that place. But the movie that made me feel the way you're describing is when I was at Titanic, and the ship was sideways, and they were hanging on the top and falling down. And and I remember looking at the guy next to me, Bradley Thomas, and I said, I can't do anything. I'm in the wrong biz. I can't do this. How do you do this? No, I was like, how the hell?
Right.
Like, we've done no visual effects. I didn't understand anything. Like, how could you? And they're up there, they're hanging, and I felt like, it was the first movie I'd ever seen in my life. Like, I could never do that. And in fact,
that wasn't visual effects. Those were real people.
Yeah. Well, whatever he did, I was just saying, I'm in the wrong biz. I can't do anything remotely like that. And in fact, when we did this movie, because this is the first movie I've had with some serious visual effects, very, very nervous about it. But we had our visual effects person, Ashley Bettini, was just superstar, because we did not have a big budget. This whole movie budgeted $40 million, and it's a war movie. I could have used $200 million. And but she made things happen that I just couldn't believe, and just basically walked me through it. I'm like, okay, we need jets taking off here and a helicopter coming in here and a guy dangling off there. How's that work? And it's got to look real. If it doesn't look real, I'm not using it. It's got to look 100% real, or it's out. And she's like, okay, well, then do this, this, and this, and you learn as you go. But yeah, Titanic was the one where I was scratching my head, like, am I in the right business? This is I can't do that.
Yeah. That one got me to the theaters. 3+ hour movie got me to the theaters, I think, like 6 or 7 times when it came out.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had that moment there. One of the movies that really took me into another world, that made me really, think this, if there's a way into cinema and film, I guess one that really inspired me, that just hit me at the right time and really made me question everything, and probably inspired me to pursue it out of love for filmmaking. It was The Matrix. That movie just, I don't know, my concept of reality was was questioned, and I love the theme of it, the characters. I was fascinated, and just like Pete said, I wondered how on earth that was possible. I had never experienced a feeling like that outside of a movie theater, and still to this day I watch that movie and I'm just transported, and I love it.
I felt that way. I have to tell you, in La La Land, I love La La Land. I love La La Land way more than I expected to.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not my normal cup of tea. Yeah. And I saw that movie and I just watched it again and again and again. I loved it. And one thing I loved about it was, how the hell did he do it? You know, you got people all over the freeways. Like, how does that work? You know, you get in the middle of the day and they're dancing and it's beautiful. Damien Chazelle, of course. And it was, that was like I was thinking, I want to meet this guy, the guy who made that movie. That's really interesting.
Yep.
Well, now, whether it was the success of your own work or approval from someone whose opinion mattered to you, what first gave you the confidence that, in fact, you could do this and you did belong?
I keep going back to the Zucker brothers, but the first script I ever wrote, I wrote with Bennett Yellen. It was called Dust to Dust. And we were in grad school for creative writing. I was working, he was doing short stories, I was writing a novel. And we thought, hey, we should kick off a screenplay, you know, because we both knew we were pretty good at dialogue and it would be fun. And we did, and we kicked it off very fast. Like, we wrote it in probably 3 weeks, honestly. And it was about two dumb guys who work in a down and out funeral parlor. Never got made. It's called Dust to Dust. And they, you know, have like layaway sales and don't get buried with high prices. And these guys go to pick up a coffin that's coming in from South America. This is in the 80s when we wrote this. And it turns out it's full of coke and they don't know where they're supposed to be going. And they got bad guys chasing them, but they don't know it. And we wrote it, and Bennett Yellen's sister was in a Hebrew dance class with David Zucker. And she said, I'll give it to him. So she did. And simultaneously, I had met a woman who was good friends, or she lived next door to Eddie Murphy in New Jersey. And she said, give it to me, I'll give it to him. And the same week, we heard from Eddie Murphy and from the Zucker brothers that they loved our script and they wanted to work with us. And they flew us out to LA, and I never looked back. And that's when I thought, okay. I mean, we did one script and we've got, you know, the two biggest comedy guys going, the Zuckers and Jim Abrams and Eddie Murphy, interested. And I remember feeling from that point forward, I could do this. And then
how old were you when that happened?
27. By the way, it took another 9 years to get a movie made, just so you know. It's not an easy business. But I sold scripts over and over. But miraculously, when I came out, because I had two people wanting to buy this script, I didn't have an agent. I called around all the agencies, and the first guy to call me back was Richard Lovett, who I'm still with today. Yeah. Thank the Lord. Like, just beautiful things happen.
It sounds a bit like Pineapple Express. They kind of use that same kind of a little bit. Wow, that's amazing. I think, man, you know what? It's honestly, I think probably like Beer Run's up there in contenders. I still have a little bit of, I don't know, maybe like imposter syndrome a little bit. So I'm still like coming to terms with all of it. It's good to know that, you know, I feel like this movie has me back in the vein of things that I really want to be doing and what I have always wanted to do. But for a while, it was very hard to really find good stuff. And like I spent a lot of time waiting for cool, great projects to come around. But after a couple of years, you just want to make something. And you know, and I feel like I'm in a great place with fantastic representation, and I'm able to, you know, do this movie with Pete. I think I finally have that feeling, or maybe have it back. I don't know if I've ever had it
Well, you and I've said this before, but Zach reminds me of young Travolta in this thing. He reminds me of Saturday Night Fever Travolta. He's that same guy. He's got street smarts. He's cool. He's not always right, but he means well, and you can't help root for him. It's an incredible performance. I'm so proud to have worked on it with you because you knocked it out of the park.
Thanks, man. Yeah, you had it in your heart. That's it. It's nice to follow your lead, buddy. Thank you.
I love that. Now, all right. So now, next one. What was the biggest obstacle each of you had to overcome to allow you to turn the projects that influenced you into your own language as a filmmaker and as an actor?
I'll tell you mine. That's a great question, by the way. And mine is, when we got out there, we thought that your job was to please the executives at the studio. And if they said, like, we handed a thing and they said, well, we missed this, 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 and this, we did all those things. And then we handed it in and you find out that didn't please them. They weren't loving that. And this was, like I said, we wrote 15 scripts, sold 15 scripts from the time we got in the business before we got Dumb and Dumber, our first movie made. And we were pleasers. We were just like, we could keep working in the studio because we pleased them, but we didn't send it over the top. And we weren't pleasing ourselves entirely. We were writing things that were good and what the studio wanted, but we didn't. I remember Richard Lovett said, Pete, cut loose, just go do some crazy shit. You know, you've got, because just hanging around, you know, when we hung around, you know, he would be like, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do that? Like, I would be like, I was writing, my writing was soft compared to how I was in person. And he said, just go nuts, write what you want to write. And Richard's given me a lot of good advice, and that was one of them, you know. And the other great advice he told me is like going to actors. He said, don't ever go to an actor and say, we're trying to get this movie made. Say, we're making the movie, do you want in? Because they don't want to miss the train. And if they think you need them to get it made, they're not as interested. But if it's getting made, and then they just want to make sure, you know, then all of a sudden they're gonna give it a good
that's
look.
hilarious. You know, that's not always the actor. You know that's the representative.
Oh, I know.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I know that. I've run into millions of actors. They say, hey, come you never offer me anything? I said, I offered you this, this, and this. And they're like, I never got it. My agents just, yeah. But anyway, that was when, that turned it for us when we just said, we're going to write for ourselves. Let it fall where it may.
And Zach, for you, you know, you started out so young and you had success at a young age, and then you got to figure out, who do I want to be? And I'm sure you probably were getting offered the same type stuff and you didn't want to be stereotyped. So for you, what was the biggest obstacle you overcame to get you to where you are right now?
I think you kind of touched on it there. It's you know, you said I said success early on. I think, you know, success was kind of relative. There was a lot of notoriety and you know, I think that the studio thought it was successful, and I know a lot of people saw it and it made a lot of people happy, and that's thrilling. But I don't think really at any point early on did I feel successful in what I, you know, in the long-term goal. I might have been the only one, but I was going, guys, this isn't it, right? You know, so I've always wanted to push it further, and to immediately my goal became to, you know, learn more about this craft and contribute in a much larger way. And so I don't think there was ever a moment when I sat back and, you know, reveled in success. It's not, one, it's very boring to do that. I don't find anything really constructive about it. Two, I don't really feel that way. So I'm always really proactive in thinking about, you know, what's next, what can I focus on, what did I learn from that experience, and you know, yeah, where are we heading? What's the next idea? What can I think about? What's the next challenge today? Yeah. So
you know, when you look at where you are now and you had to learn lessons the hard way, what's what's one thing that each of you would have liked to been able to tell the young version of yourself that might have saved you a lot of grief along the way?
Ooh. Oh man. No, I don't know. You go first, Pete. I'll think.
This is a toughie. I have to say, like, I have a lot of regrets about up to age 24 or 5. Like, I was just a idiot, and high school and college. I mean, I loved it. By the way, I had a ball. I had millions of friends. It was good, but it wasn't. I look back at like some things, like some regret. Like now I don't take anything for granted, and I haven't since then. I had a couple losses early on in my life, my early 20s, where I just I know things can go away like that, and I didn't I took things for granted when I was young. I don't anymore. I really don't. Every day I try to appreciate everything that's going on. Like I was just saying yesterday or the other day, I was at a thing, and so I was on, Larry David interviewed me at the DGA, and he asked me, he goes, you ever just, get like bored, like you just want to walk off set? I was like, no, quite the opposite. I'm like, I can't believe after all these years, I still can't believe it. I'm so lucky to be able to do this. And I'm pinching myself to this at all times. I never got used to the fact that this is happening. I'm just so grateful, and I don't think I had gratitude as a kid, and I certainly do now. And I know that things can go away very fast, and you should appreciate everything you got.
Yeah, that's a really, really good one. Geez, that's great, Pete. I'm trying to think. Go back and say anything. I'd probably, I guess if I could go back, and coach myself, I'd probably just, tell myself to like relax a little bit. You don't need it's hard. I think there was like a moment in time when, it felt like whatever I was working on was the end all be all, or could be the last thing I was doing. I've treated every project like that, and that kind of led me to push myself to the limit several times when it really wasn't necessary at all. In fact, that they probably contributed to some of the worst movies that I've been in. But yeah, it's like life will go on. I feel much more confident now in, that each movie is really an art project, and you're taking time. You go to this art project, you connect with these people, and you craft something together as a team, and it's going to be what it is, and trust in that process. And now with that approach, I'm able to sort of dive into different things and adapt and feel comfortable. And I don't feel like it's writing necessarily on my back. And so if I could go back, I would just try and, somehow share that mentality with myself,